One Wednesday morning in Calgary, the city's largest construction site falls silent. Federal officers appear, work stops, IDs are checked. On the surface, it looks like straightforward law enforcement. But if you've watched Canadian politics, or any politics, long enough, you learn to ask questions. Why now? Why this specific high-profile location? A location guaranteed to attract news cameras? Was this truly about checking work permits? Or were we watching a carefully staged piece of political theater? A calculated move in the ongoing federal versus provincial power Canada struggle? Today, we peel back the layers of the political fallout Calgary raid. This wasn't just a raid. It looks like a move in a high-stakes chess game, a battle for control, for narrative, and for the future of Canada immigration policy debate. And the truth about CBSA and its new focus on enforcement within Canada might be far more complex than the official story suggests. Rising action, the official story, and the cracks. Let's start with the official narrative, the story presented to the public. Legal experts, quoted in the initial reports, frame this as part of a broader shift in CBSA enforcement. This sounds plausible. Public frustration over immigration pressures has been building, as the original video highlighted, simmering for years. So a government demonstrating action seems like a logical response. The evidence seems to support this narrative at first glance. We know about the significant funding boost, $1.3 billion. We know about the hiring of CBSA 1,000 new officers and an equal number of RCMP officers. And crucially, we heard the official justification directly. These resources were allocated not just for the border, but explicitly for critical enforcement within Canada. CBSA inland enforcement is now official policy. It sounds decisive. It sounds like the federal government in Ottawa is finally getting tough, listening to the concerns of ordinary Canadians. But let's pause. As an analyst, you look for inconsistencies. You look for actions that don't quite fit the stated motive. Crack number one, the location. If your primary goal is maximizing the number of apprehensions of unauthorized workers, is a massive, highly visible, daytime raid on one of the most prominent construction projects in Alberta the most efficient tactic? Or does it maximize media exposure? This wasn't a quiet, targeted operation. This was public. This felt like a statement. The choice of the Calgary Event Center project wasn't likely about operational efficiency. It seems to have been chosen for its symbolic value. Crack number two, the timing. Consider the political climate when this raid occurred. The Alberta immigration policy debate was reaching a fever pitch. Public discontent over housing costs and job competition, often linked rightly or wrongly to immigration, was high. Alberta's provincial government, led by Premier Danielle Smith, was actively challenging Ottawa's authority on multiple fronts. The raid didn't just happen during this period. It happened at a moment that perfectly amplified the existing political tensions. It provided dramatic visuals that fed directly into the ongoing narrative of federal failure and provincial frustration. This doesn't feel like routine enforcement timing. It feels like perception management. It feels like manufacturing a moment to send a message. We are doing something, even if that something doesn't address the root cause of the problem. Climax, the political battlefield. Ottawa versus Alberta. So who benefits from this perfectly timed, highly symbolic enforcement action? To understand the real game, you need to understand the motivations of the two main players on this chessboard. The federal government, Ottawa, managing a policy crisis. Let's be blunt. The current federal government's immigration policy is facing a crisis of its own making. The Canada immigration policy debate has been dominated by the government's push for high intake numbers. But this policy, particularly regarding temporary residents, has had massive, arguably unmanaged consequences. We're talking about the 2.8 million plus temporary residents currently in the country, students, workers, others. As we established, this isn't hundreds of thousands, it's millions. The pathways to permanent residency remain narrow and complex for many. This has created what experts call the temporary resident trap. Millions are left in limbo, contributing to the economy but without clear futures, making them vulnerable. From a policy perspective, this looks like mismanagement on a grand scale. It created enormous pressure on housing, healthcare, and social services. Pressures felt most acutely at the provincial level. Now consider Ottawa's political motivation. The government is facing intense public backlash over the cost of living, the housing crisis, and the perception that immigration levels are out of control. Their approval ratings reflect this public discontent. They desperately need to appear proactive. They need a political win, or at least the appearance of taking action. Enter CBSA inland enforcement. What better way to signal toughness and control than a highly publicized raid? It allows Ottawa to look like it's responding to public anger about unauthorized work, and without fundamentally changing the high-intake immigration policies that contributed to the problem in the first place. Think about it. Actually deporting 2.8 million people, or even a significant fraction, is logistically and politically impossible. But funding CBSA 1,000 new officers and authorizing visible actions like the Calgary raid, that's achievable. It generates headlines. It looks like decisive action. It helps manage the political fallout Calgary raid, not by solving the root problem, but by addressing the public perception. It's classic political crisis management. Create a controlled spectacle to distract from the underlying systemic issues. The truth about CBSA's expanded role might be less about strict enforcement and more about strategic public relations for a government under pressure. The provincial government, the power play opportunity. Now shift perspective to Edmonton, Alberta's capital. For Premier Danielle Smith and her government, focused on provincial autonomy and challenging federal overreach, the Calgary raid wasn't a problem, it was political gold. It was presented as irrefutable proof of their central argument. Ottawa's immigration policies are failing, and Alberta is paying the price. The raid perfectly validated the narrative they were already pushing. Look at how strategically Alberta leveraged this event. Tactic number 1, the survey and framing. Shortly after the raid amplified public concern, Smith's government launched that controversial online survey. Crucially, the survey began with a video that explicitly framed the narrative, linking federal immigration policies directly to Alberta's high housing costs and unemployment. It wasn't just asking for opinions. It was telling Albertans what to be angry about and who to blame, Ottawa. Tactic number 2, the threat. The survey floated the idea of withholding provincial social programs from certain newcomers. This wasn't just policy musing, it was a direct challenge to federal jurisdiction over immigration settlement. It was a shot across Ottawa's bow in the federal versus provincial Power Canada battle. Tactic number 3, the endgame, the referendum, the ultimate leverage. The Danielle Smith referendum threat isn't just about immigration. It's part of a broader strategy under the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act. This act allows Alberta to potentially refuse enforcement of federal laws it deems harmful to the province. Potential referendum topics include creating a provincial police force, withdrawing from the Canada Pension Plan, and gaining more control over immigration. The Calgary raid and the public anger it stoked provided political fuel for this larger sovereignty agenda. It helped build the case that Alberta needs more power precisely because Ottawa can't manage its own files. The collision, who's playing whom? So, you have two political players, both seemingly benefiting from the same event. Ottawa gets a PR win, appearing tough on enforcement to appease national voters. Alberta gets validation for its anti-Ottawa stance and fuel for its sovereignty push. It looks like a symbiotic political relationship, almost too convenient. And the workers caught in the raid, the ones facing potential deportation, whose lives were upended? Using the technique, the brutal truth, they appear to be pawns in this larger game of federal versus provincial Power Canada. Their personal dramas serve the political narratives of actors far removed from the construction site dust. Falling action, the endgame, perception, management, and sovereignty. So what is the real purpose of this new emphasis on CBSA inland enforcement? If it's not a serious attempt to solve the complex issue of 2.8 million temporary residents, what is it? It appears to be primarily about perception management. It's about creating visible enforcement actions, visible enforcement, that resonate with a public frustrated by perceived border chaos and economic strain. It provides political cover. It allows politicians at both levels to say they are doing something, while the core policy challenges remain largely unaddressed. The truth about CBSA's role in this context might be shifting from purely operational to partly performative. It becomes an instrument used to signal government resolve, regardless of its actual impact on the ground. But there's a deeper game being played here, especially from Alberta's perspective. This ties back to the core issue raised in the original video, Canada's sovereignty. But the challenge isn't external, it's internal. The Canada immigration policy debate has become a proxy war for a fundamental battle over jurisdiction and power within the Canadian Federation. Who controls the levers of immigration? Who determines the economic and social future of the provinces? Who defines what Canada's sovereignty means in practice? The federal versus provincial power Canada dynamic is being tested. Actions like the Calgary raid, regardless of Ottawa's initial intent, are being weaponized by provinces like Alberta to argue for a devolution of power. They use these events to say, if you can't manage it effectively and fairly, let us do it. This political fallout Calgary raid is not an isolated incident. It's likely a preview of more jurisdictional battles to come. Resolution. The board is set. So when you look back at the Calgary immigration raid, don't just see federal officers checking IDs. See it for what it likely was, a calculated political move on a national chessboard, a performance orchestrated or at least opportunistically leveraged by multiple players with distinct agendas. The federal government trying to manage the optics of its own policy failures, the provincial government seizing the moment to advance its fight for greater autonomy. The official narrative of simple law enforcement seems increasingly thin when viewed through this political lens. The silence around the consequences of Canada's immigration policies may have been broken, as the original video concluded. But perhaps it's been replaced by the calculated noise of political maneuvering. This forces us to ask a critical question about the nature of governance itself. Do you believe actions like the Calgary raid are genuine attempts to enforce the law? Or are they primarily political moves designed to manage public opinion? Share your perspective, your analysis, in the comments below. Stay legal.